Back. So what does this pandemic mean to the efforts to build more density housing in California? After all, the densest city in America, New York, was the epicenter of the pandemic. Joining us from San Francisco is a leading advocate for density housing and mass transportation in this state, State Senator Scott Wiener. So, Senator, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York famously said a couple of weeks ago, when it came to the rapid transmission of COVID-19, it was density, density, density.
Respectfully, he's wrong. The reason that New York City has had such a bad time with COVID is in significant part because there was a delay in locking down the city. In the Bay Area and in LA and California, we acted much more quickly. And so New York delayed, and they're paying the price, unfortunately, as a result. And this whole argument about density somehow causes more COVID-19, it's being based on one city, New York City. The second densest city in the country is San Francisco, which has not had that problem because we acted early. Or you look at some of the densest cities in the world, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taipei, cities that certainly have struggled with COVID-19, as everyone has, but that have done a much more effective job in containing outbreaks. And so you have some very dense cities in the US and abroad that have done a good job on this virus because it's about public health response. So it's really not about density, it's about poverty, it's about health disparities, and it's about governmental response or lack thereof.
So the subways weren't a vector of the disease?
There really has not been a lot of evidence that the New York subway was a primary vector or cause of COVID-19. We have people that crowd in a lot of situations. They're all over this country, at the Walmart or the Costco or in church or at a sporting event. There are a lot of situations in, whether it's in rural, suburbia, or urban America, where you have large numbers of people coming together. The subway is one of them, but it's not the only one. So I think right now there's a narrative that some people are putting out that cities are unhealthy, that transit is unhealthy, that apartment buildings are unhealthy, and there really isn't any evidence to support that.
So this is a crisis that has resulted in millions of people now working from home. And there's a strong suggestion that's the future. We may not need density development.
I mean, a lot of people are working from home now because they have to, because we're in a lockdown situation. And we've always had a certain percentage of our workforce that works remotely or works from home, and that's great. I think there has been there have been a lot of speculation about what life is going to be like after we control COVID-19. Some people say no one's ever going to want to gather or go to restaurants again. I think we're reading a lot of speculation into what will happen. We are social animals, and we will come back together after this is done. And I know a lot of people who are working from home because they have the privilege of having jobs where they can work from home. And I will tell you, a large majority of them intensely dislike it. And they, even though they're productive, they're very unhappy doing it. Their coworkers are very unhappy. Having Zoom meetings is not a good substitute for in-person meetings. And so I don't agree. There might be some uptick in people who then start permanently working at home. I do not believe that we're going to see a fundamental transformation where people overwhelmingly are going to work from home. I think most people don't like that, and I think it ends up causing other problems. We've been doing this for 6 weeks. I don't think we can make these kind of broad predictions about the future of work based on 6 weeks during a pandemic, during a quarantine of people working at home. I think people reach the end of their rope at some point where they can't take it any longer.
State Senator Scott Wiener, Democrat of San Francisco, thank you for taking the time.
I love LA. Thank you so much.
With a very different point of view is Joel Kotkin, a presidential fellow of urban futures at Chapman University and the executive director of the Houston-based Urban Reform Institute. State Senator Wiener just a moment ago said that New York is an outlier, that other dense cities in Asia, San Francisco, have not seen the kind of COVID cases New York has seen. So it's other reasons, not simply where people live.
No, it's not just density. Southern California is very dense. It's what we call exposure density. One of the biggest problems in New York, and if you know New York at all, it's really concentrated in the poor neighborhoods. There aren't many really poor neighborhoods in these Asian cities, nothing like what we have in New York. You have people traveling for great distances. There's definitely more than one reason. San Francisco, by the way, is far less dense than New York, is a wealthy city with very few poor people, which probably helped them a great deal, and has a lot of people who can work at home because they're working, let's say, in finance or tech. New York has a much, much larger percentage of population that works, in things where you're exposed to people. I mean, I think the Asian cities, which I know very well, I worked in Singapore for a long time, are much more disciplined than our populations. The cities are cleaner, a lot cleaner. People, when the government says do this, they do it.
So you're convinced the New York subways were a vector of this disease?
There's no way that there's no relationship with density in transit. New York is 45% of the transit ridership. The only suburbs in America with high COVID readings are in places like Long Island, where people take the train to work.
But part of the effort at density in public transportation is to fight global warming and the emission of greenhouse gases, or GHG.
It would be much better for the environment, A, if people could work at home when that's possible, and B, if they could work close to where they live. This current system isn't going to work. California has been, 39th out of 50 states in per capita reductions of GHG. For all the talking, this policy isn't working. Why do Wiener and all the people who set the agenda on a lot of these issues, how can they have no interest in people working at home? By far the way to reduce GHG the fastest. California doesn't do anything for this. Actually, when I used to live in Los Angeles, I had to pay a big fee so I could work at home. I mean, why is that?
Joel Kotkin, thanks for taking the time, and stay safe.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Up next, the leader of the Republicans in the California State Assembly weighs in on Governor Gavin Newsom's closing of the beaches in Orange County and her concerns about his overall response when we return.